Welcome to our series on the ultimate BMW M3s. In the first two episodes we've driven the E30 M3 Sport Evo and then the E46 M3 GT. So, logically, that must mean this is next. Now, before anyone gets pernickety, yes, the E46 M3 GTR with its 4-litre V8 is arguably the pinnacle of the E46 M3 range. But as only 3 road cars were ever produced and they reportedly reside under dust sheets in Munich, we decided to go with the CSL. I hope you'll understand. Anyway, a total of 1,383 CSLs were produced worldwide during 2003, and the UK was actually the largest market, with 422 right-hand drive CSLs making it over here, 316 in silver grey, 106 in black sapphire. None, however, made it to North America. With its beautifully integrated boot spoiler, BBS 19-inch rims and distinctive hole in the front bumper, the CSL is quite the looker. One of the biggest performance upgrades, as the name suggests, is the reduction in weight, with the CSL tipping the scales some 110 kilos lighter than a standard E46 M3. There is thinner rear glass, a lightweight boot floor, bucket seats and door cards made of carbon too.
Perhaps the most famous bit of the weight savings on this car was the carbon fibre roof, which saved 7 kilos. But of course it saved 7 kilos from high up in the car. So as to quote the original brochure on the CSL, it decreased angular momentum about the vertical axis. They actually put that in the brochure. If you ever get to drive an E46 M3 CSL, then it's always worth pressing the sport button just down there, because it just increases the noise of this amazing S54 engine a little bit more. It is the most incredible sounding engine. So in the front bumper we've got that hole, and if you look under the bonnet you've got the amazing carbon airbox, and it just sounds absolutely brilliant. The induction noise, wow, I mean seriously, this side of a McLaren F1, I'm not sure there's anything better sounding. It sounds so good.
The 3.2-litre S54 engine can trace its roots back to the S50 and the E36. In the CSL it got sharper cam profiles and modified exhaust valves, plus that modified air intake system breathing through the hole in the bumper. With the outputs of 355 brake horsepower at 7,900 RPM and 273 pounds-foot of torque at 4,900 RPM, it is actually only 17 brake horsepower and 4 pounds-foot stronger than a standard E46, but it shouts about it rather more. The factory-claimed 0-60 mph time was 4.6 seconds, and the top speed was limited to 155 miles an hour, unless you produced a valid racing licence, in which case BMW would remove the electronic leash. The gearbox is perhaps the most divisive part of the CSL's package. Known as SMG2, it's a standard 6-speed Getrag transmission with an electro-hydraulically actuated clutch. You could get an SMG box on a standard M3 too, but the CSL got an upgraded software package, allowing it to shift ratios in as little as 80 milliseconds.
It takes some working with. You can kind of, if you just lift off a little bit, it definitely smooths it out an awful lot. In some ways it does suit the personality of the car. The pedals themselves, there's not a lot of sort of, they're funny little sort of ears behind the steering wheel. You have to actually reach quite a bit for them. So it works well, to be honest, on a track when you're up high in the revs. It's pretty good on downshifts, but I think a lot of people would have preferred to have the option of a manual in this. It was at that era of paddle shift boxes where it just wasn't quite perfect yet. However, the chassis balance on this car, that's another story altogether. It is just fantastic.
The suspension has slightly shorter springs, retuned dampers, larger diameter anti-roll bars, and aluminium rear suspension links with stiffer bushings. This is all allied to a steering rack that was quickened from 15.4 to 1 to 14.5 to 1.
So whereas before in the first two cars, a lot of it was about the front end, now the rear is definitely much more in play with this. It is obviously absolutely soaking wet at the moment at Castle Combe. I did drive it in the dry as well. These cars originally came on cup rubber, and in the wet it was said that they were pretty much lethal, so that was often something that was changed pretty quickly. This is on Cup 2 rubber, and it just shows how much this sort of track day tyre has come on in the years since, because it's much better when it's cold, and you've got much better traction in the wet now. It's a car that, over the limit, the actual breakaway is quite sort of, it's not that progressive, but as soon as it's over the limit, it's just wonderful. You can just hold it at angles, and it's so controllable on the throttle. I do love it.
The eagle-eyed amongst you might have noticed something unusual about the steering wheel on this car. The simple round design with solitary M button is all standard stuff, but this one is wrapped in leather, not Alcantara. The trouble, as the owner informs me, is that if you actually use your car, then BMW's Alcantara deteriorates remarkably quickly.
The other change that people frequently made with the E46 CSL was the brakes, because the standard ones just weren't up to it. So what people tended to do is, what's happened to this car, it's got a set of AP racing brakes on it, which really do make all the difference, because it's a car that you do want to take to a track. Even heavy duty road work, to be honest, the standard brakes just weren't up to it, so it was just something people did. Some people changed just the fronts, other people changed front and rear, and that's what's on this car. It's strange to think at the time that the E46 CSL was, well, it received quite mixed opinions. People loved the engine and the sound, but they just weren't sure whether it was really worth that much over a standard E46 M3. Now you get into it, and it feels like a very, very special thing indeed. Time has definitely been kind to this car.